regularly. Don't just sit in front of the screen and feel obliged to look at the camera the whole time. Basically, when we're doing presentations, we're using PowerPoints, we can hardly see anyone, just a few people down in the strip on the side or above. So you don't need to feel like you have to be looking at the camera to support us. Just being there, being comfortable, and not getting stressed too much from the screen is something we would invite you and encourage you to do. So take screen breaks and turn away regularly. Stand up and exercise. If you're sitting too long, you need to move. And so that's kind of pacing yourself, really. So making sure that you're not overdoing it. I'm getting distracted by our team, actually, because they're all sort of looking so intently at me, but it's a still picture. So I have to focus on one side of the screen here. I don't know why I'm sharing that with you, but I think it's because if you see my eyes keep going over the other side, I keep thinking someone's looking at me. Anyway, I'm pacing myself. I'm just slowing down, taking my time. And yeah, you want to, I don't know if you've ever tried explaining to someone who doesn't speak English what pacing means. It's not easy, but it's this kind of ability to just go at the right speed and keep things in reserve so that when difficulties come, you've got the resources to help you over. Don't just go at something really fast and then have to have a kind of relapse, as it were, flare up. So a good tip would be to commit yourself to everything. So you say, okay, I'm going to go to everything on the retreat. Everything's good. I'm going to go to it. But when it comes to the point of turning up, you may decide, actually, this isn't the right thing for you to do at the moment. So if you've already committed yourself, you're more likely to do it. If you're kind of wavering, shall I go or not, long before you find that more difficult. So just think, I'm going to go to everything, but you've got permission to do what you need to do if things are coming up for you. The recordings would be available after each session. So if you can't get to the session, particularly the presentation or the meditations, you can do them by going to the right place on the Unity of Practice website, and you can look at the recordings there. And also recognize that when you're meditating, particularly on a more intense basis, things will start coming up. In fact, you almost want them to come up. You're kind of trying to connect with different parts of you. Some parts we like to be connected with, and then there's some of what some people might call the darker sides of ourselves, which or things that have happened to us in the past, things that we don't connect with. But when we create this space of in meditation in our mind, then things start bubbling up to the surface. And this is a good thing in many ways, because things that are bothering you a little bit, but you're kind of pushing down, they always trouble you. There's something going on into your mind, and it's difficult to deal with. But if you can kind of accept what's coming up, think, oh, this is coming up now, and a bit like with pain, and just accepting it would be the first stage. And then gradually you feel like this is being integrated, so you become a whole person. I'll say a little bit more about this as we go through the presentation. And there's a kind of a natural energy pattern on the retreat. Often people report after the first day or two that they're feeling really tired. So we've got a little diagram here that Vidyamala did. And this diagram just shows so that you sorry, who is it? What's the name of the person that can't see properly, so I can refer to you if you want?
Rosie.
Rosie, okay, Rosie. So it's like it's like a, what's it called? A bell graph. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Like a slope going up like a hill and then coming down and fading away again. So it's a graph basically on an XY basis axis. So when you arrive, you're down the bottom, right? And then stuff might come up and you feel a bit challenged by that. It's a bit like you're going uphill then. And you maybe stuff's coming up, you feel really joyful and you've got a lot of energy. And sometimes you don't always know what to do with that energy. And sometimes you get a bit of both. Sometimes you can have this waveform where you think, wow, that was really good. Oh no, I feel really down. And you get these kind of reactive patterns sometimes, not all the time. Some people do in other ways, but often things are just actually settling down to meditate and being quiet can be challenging in itself. But we're trying to integrate this more and more into the practice. You go on up and then you kind of level out and things are going quite well. You kind of integrated. So after maybe on day 3, you think, oh, this is going good. But then what you start doing, you think, this is halfway through the retreat and there's only a little bit time left. And you then start starting to calm down. You're starting to simulate. It's all really going really well. You're kind of like rolling down a hill. So the graph is going down now. So you've gone over this bump, you're on your way down, and you're ready then to take the retreat learning into your life. So hopefully by the time you get back to the base camp, you are well resourced. And in some ways you've changed to some degree. And then you have to reintegrate with other people, which we could talk about later in the retreat. So that the psyche goes through this process over the retreat. And it may vary for different people. So don't be surprised if you're getting more and more tired. That is normal. Just say it's normal to get tired. And you probably just think, oh, well, I'm tired. That's normal. And just go and have a little snooze or relax, or don't try and run away from it and do lots of things, because that probably make you more tired. Okay, so this retreat is about going deeper and developing a blue sky mind. We're going to use 2 lists to look at this. The lists come from a Buddhist text, well, different Buddhist texts actually, and I'll tell a bit more about this. But basically, we're just using ordinary English to explain it all, so that we don't use any Buddhist Sanskrit terms and things, which be interesting in themselves, but just so that just feel it's for you. It's not a Buddhist retreat. It's a mindfulness and compassion retreat. So, but I just wanted to pay kind of respect really to where the roots are of these teachings, and they're found in the Buddha's teachings. So today is an introduction to the retreat, and we'll do some practicing, just kind of helping us settle into the retreat, developing our mindfulness more. Tomorrow, Vidyamala will be introducing the hindrances. These are the blockages to the awakening factors. And then on Wednesday, I'll talk us through the awakening factors. And on Thursday morning, there will be a whole practice day. So a couple of hours of just practicing sitting, walking meditations, something like that. That's what we find works really well on these retreats. So we're going to use a number of metaphors, symbols, and so one is going deeper. So I hope you're not frightened of water, because this one's a picture of water, and there's bubbles coming up from below, so it shows that someone's gone deeper. There's a blue sky mind. There's a nice picture of a blue sky. So the first one's just a greeny, watery thing with bubbles bubbling through it, like in the sea. There's a blue sky. And the last one is a lotus. So I'm going to talk a bit about the symbolism of the lotus. So there's now a picture appeared on the screen of a lotus, or a water lily, floating on the surface. Nice bright pinky color. Petals, and it's just floating there on the water, which is a symbol in itself, isn't it? Something so beautiful. It's just sitting there, still floating. And then I've got another photo here of what could be water lilies, or plants growing up from the bottom of an area of water. It's difficult to know I know what it is, but I won't tell you what it is. But it's just stalks growing up towards the surface, and it's taken underwater, looking upwards. So the lotus grows in water. If you've never seen a lotus, you probably need to go to the east to see, or maybe somewhere like Kew Gardens if you're living in England, see a lotus. But water lilies are pretty common. And the main difference between the lotus and the water lilies is that lotuses go out of the water, they grow above it, but otherwise they look very similar. So something about lotuses, which is really important to recognize, is that they have their roots down in the mud, in the dark, damp, well, it's all damp because it's water, or the dark sort of muddy place. Something is growing, and it grows up through this water, through this medium of water, and it blossoms above the water in the air. So, and now there's a picture of what are supposed to be roots. I think there may be a picture of that someone's made up of trees, but it's in the winter. There's just lots and lots of branches and small twigs going off the branches. And the root system for most plants is pretty much like this: stems going down and then lots of roots going out. Actually, to be completely accurate, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but a lotus actually has a kind of like a log thing that it grows out of. Sometimes you can eat lotus roots, but just for now, the most important thing is you've got these kind of like nerve endings, as it were, going down into the depths, into the forest of our mind. I've got a horrible feeling I'm going too fast in this, because I'm going to be finishing soon, so I might have to slow down. So what can we say about this? Well, this is what we do when we go deeper. That when we approach mindfulness, we all have our different reasons for it. And as we become more mindful, we begin to realize there are parts of us that aren't being connected up with our conscious mind. Probably all of us are probably living a life where a lot of what we do is kind of distracting ourselves from something. For many of us, it could be like the incomprehensibility of being alive. You know, like why, if you are a thinking type, you might be thinking, why am I alive? What's life all about? And particularly when there's disasters and you have sort of difficulties, real serious difficulties, you just have this wonder about what's life really all about. And then you kind of we often make our lives full of distractions. And if you've been on a breathworks course, you will know that we very much teach the approach of becoming learning to be accepting of anything we find unpleasant and difficult, the very thing that we want to push away, keep away from us. And this pushing away and holding it away could be through other distractions. Oh, I want this, and this is really interesting. But we have to not forget and not allow the thing we're pushing away to just pushed underground. And often we do that. We kind of repress certain emotions, certain things that bubble up, and we hold them down. And then we're in this state of being kind of in tension. There's one part of us pushing something away, and then something else going, I want that, I want that, I want that. So you're kind of stuck, stressed out between these two poles of don't want that, want that, don't want that, want that. And this in its turn causes an enormous amount of suffering. And this is really what the Buddha, if you've ever heard the Buddha talk about dukkha or suffering, this is a kind of thing he's talking about. It's more like this ill-fitting of things, like, oh, if only I had that, everything would be all right. But it won't be, because I haven't really accepted this. And so what I found really interesting when I got involved with Vidyamala and we started Breathworks is this coming into contact with what it's like for people to have real suffering. People who have got long-term, I didn't know I never came across the idea of long-term suffering. I don't know why, I never met anyone that had long-term suffering until I met Vidyamala. And it was a bit like, aha, yeah, there must be lots of people. And then I discovered like 1 in 5 people have long-term suffering. And how do you live with that? I mean, I tried to explain it to members of my family when I met Vidyamala, when I entered into a relationship with her. And they said things like, well, isn't she going to get better? She's going to be cured. And I said, no, she's going to have to live with her condition for as far as she knows, for the rest of her life. And it's almost like slightly incomprehensible to someone who's healthy, physically healthy, relatively happy human being. And even if you go through periods of difficulties, of pain, acute pain, or even mental difficulties, you have a feeling that it's going to get over it. You're going to get over it, and it's going to be cured somehow. But learning that there are people suffering all the time, and when one starts to contemplate it, you begin to realize, well, we're all suffering in many ways, not so severely and acutely or strongly as other people. But everyone's got to deal with a life that causes disappointment, struggles, and so on. So there is suffering in life. But the main thing that was like an aha moment is this idea of accepting it. Well, how do you accept having to live with something that's so long term and so painful? And this is what kind of it's like Buddhists talk about insight. It's like mind opening up, going, yes, that's amazing. Yeah, well, how do you do that? And this is what we try to do at Breathworks, is to teach people how to live a life with quality, with respect, with love, passion for oneself and for others, so that you can not just so that you can get by, but actually so you can flourish and you can grow and develop. So this picture of the roots is where you could say you're getting your nourishment from. And that's where plants get their nourishment from the depths. So allowing yourself to give yourself, well, it's not really permission, but actually just accepting that we have these depths. And in these depths, there's something really wonderfully amazing and great. So one of the things that when I was preparing my PowerPoints that I forgot to cover at first was the whole thing about compassion, because that's in the title of the retreat. And in the little group yesterday, several people said they were coming on this retreat because of the compassion element of it. So it was really great they said that, because I thought I better bring in compassion, because in these two lists we're using, compassion isn't specifically mentioned. So I hope the next slide gives you some sort of indication of where compassion fits in. So I couldn't do this. I would have liked to have kind of got a sun somewhere in the midst of the roots system. So on the screen, I've got this picture still of these roots and all these little tiny branches going off down into the darkness. And on the other side of the screen, I've got, actually, it's a photo of the sun. It's almost blinding even on the screen. And it's what it represents is that within us, there, down in the depth somewhere, sometimes it's close to the surface because we all feel it, but it sometimes gets hidden in the darkness and we have to go and sort of explore for it. There is the sun of loving kindness. It's like there is this kernel of love within all of us. And when we're experiencing difficulties, when we feel bad about ourselves and, life just seems to be so hard, it's so difficult to remember this, that down deep within us, that there is some bright there's a brightness. Can't say what it is. There just is a brightness. You could call it love, just for convenience, a short word, love. And it's like a sun. It's not like a diamond or a stone. It's something that's kind of pulsing. And so it's something that's glowing. This is how the Buddha put it, and it's translated in one of the texts. And he calls this universal loving kindness. It's got a word in Sanskrit and Pali. It's called metta, actually, just for those who want to know, MTTA. And he says it glows, it shines, and then it blazes forth. So I'm doing this hand movement of something blazing forth. So it's kind of wonderful to think that, isn't it? That within all of us, we have this kernel of love that we don't always feel. Obviously, we feel it sometimes when we're kind and loving towards people. or when people are being kind and loving towards us, we feel that sort of shining, that brightness, maybe not always blazing forth. It's not always strong, but it can blaze forth. So usually it's just perhaps glowing a little bit in the darkness. And in the course of the meditation practices, maybe this is what we'll go seeking for, this kind of kernel of where our love sits, where that within us, within all of us, all the time, there is this kernel or this seed or this little bright light of love that is shining. And the more we focus on it, the more it shines. And the more it shines, the more it nourishes us. And so the compassionate element of mindfulness is where we recognize that, the compassionate aspect of what we do at Breathworks and in the mindfulness world isn't just about mindfulness. It's not just about being in the present moment. I mean, often it's talked about when you say, what is mindfulness? You say it's a special awareness of being present in the moment. This is one aspect of it. It's rather the poor cousin, actually. The rich cousin, or the king or the queen, is this son of universal loving kindness. And one aspect of compassion is memory, is to remember who we are, what we are. We're human beings, and we have the capacity for love, for caring, for honesty, for being valuing human life in general. And this is something we all have, but we forget about and we lose touch with. So you could say that a big aspect of mindfulness is trying to remember, and the big aspect of compassion, and the word compassion perhaps is what reminds us that actually we are compassionate beings. Sometimes we just don't think compassionately, or we don't speak compassionately, or we don't act compassionately. And so the compassion kind of gets lost down in the darkness. But this compassion, or this love, or this universal loving kindness isn't based on contracts like I love you if you love me. It's just something like having a sun within you that wants to shine out. And a lot of the time when we're not in touch with it and we're distracting ourselves, it kind of inhibits that ability for the compassionate aspect of our being to shine forth. And gradually what we begin to learn is that when we're in touch with this aspect of ourselves, things feel a lot better than when we're not. It's as though, Vidyamala talked yesterday about tightness and then openness. And it's like when we're training ourselves really to be more in touch with this compassionate element, this sun of loving kindness. It's as though our mind begins to soften and expand. I don't mean we're going to become simple or something, but it's a bit like, instead of being tight and rigid and very tightly defined by everything, we start letting go of so much that we're kind of holding onto, and then life just seems a lot easier. And you can train yourself in this, and this is what a lot of people do. In fact, most of the religions of the world have this principle that life is the most precious thing we have, and that caring for life is the most precious thing we do. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. But I think as human beings, we are loving, caring beings that are often confused and do rather stupid things in our confusion and so forth. But if we can focus more on the fact that it's better to be loving than it is not to be loving. So if you're a completely non-compassionate person with no love, you're probably living in a rather small, tight world. And it's only because, I'm sorry, I don't want to put anyone down here if you're feeling that, but what I want to say is that within us all, we have this capacity for freeing ourselves from that tightness to open up to things. So how do we do that? Well, we have to, first of all, remove some blockages, and that's what Vidyamala is going to talk about tomorrow, the hindrances. And then you can see, I'm going to talk more about on the day after, what happens when you remove these hindrances, these blockages, and how the loving kindness of your being sort of flourishes into your life, so that they kind of wake you up more and more, and you realize more and more things, and life becomes richer and richer. So it's should be a good retreat. Let's go through those things. So I've got a slide here that says the lotus, which is the symbol of this whole process of having its roots down in the dark, muddy, kind of quite warm, I suppose mud would be, wouldn't it? It's kind of the bottom of the pond. It's kind of sucking out the nutrients that are flowing upwards through the stem, and it causes growth. And the plant starts off as a little bud down in the mud, and it starts to grow, and it can feel the light. It's as though there's an external light pulling up, because there is in a gut lotus, there's the sun pulling it towards us, pulling it towards it. And we can imagine this as being the same for us. It's as though it sounds a bit of a cliche, I'm going to grow towards the light, but it's a bit like opening up to the light within us, or the light outside of us, and we're opening up to that. And it's as though this causes growth. And we don't really know how we grow, but we can feel it. So often, a little tip about meditation, don't worry too much about what happens in your meditation. It's not useful to say you've had a good or bad meditation. It really isn't. It's more useful to say, this is what happened in my meditation. If you're doing an inquiry on yourself, like what happened in the meditation, good thing to do. You become more mindful of what happened, and you just generally develop more and more awakeness, mindfulness of being alive. And if you can keep in mind the fact, actually, the more you're able to love yourself, which isn't easy, and sometimes it's easier to love other people, but the more you take yourself seriously, that you're kind to yourself, you give yourself what you need, and you also perhaps find the opportunities when they arise to be generous, to move towards other people and care, use that caring dimension we have, that faculty of care for other people. It causes growth, and it's growth in a good way. We're not growing bad, we're growing good. We become more light-like. We're kind of growing towards something more expansive, more wonderful, if you like. And we're all doing that. In fact, we've all done it because we're here. We've all grown. We've all moved from some place to a more expansive place. So, you need to all pat yourself on the back. In fact, we could all just do that now, just give ourselves a good pat on the back, smile, and then think, yeah, I'm a good person. And even if they're part of you say, no, you're not, you say, go away. I'm a good person. I'm kind. I'm capable of kindness. I know what kindness is. I know what love is. And I want this to flourish in me. And I want to allow this to come up. So this is the going deeper part, is going down into the depths and allowing the flowers to grow up. So there's another picture of lotuses on a pond, and it just says, roots go down, flowers grow up. So the flower of your being is growing up, but only if the roots are going down. A lot of people take up meditation because they want to cut the roots off. They think if they cut all the roots off, they'll be happy. But I can assure you it won't. There's a famous book that was published in San Francisco many years ago by Buddhists called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. And this is such a good description of what people sometimes get from meditating. They sometimes have ecstatic, wonderful experiences, but they can't keep them up. They just come and go. And then they get very frustrated that they're not there all the time. So then they gradually realize, if they're wise enough, and sometimes they might need a kind of master or teacher to point it out, there's quite a lot that they're just pushing away the whole time, just like pain, just pushing it away, and don't want that. And then you have to go to laundry and start cleaning up your show, and then you can become a whole integrated person that's growing up towards light. That's the whole thing to remember. So don't just think you're not going to go and explore those wonderful, interesting depths, because that's where the nourishment often comes from. The light also is really important because, as we know, plants use light to produce food. They have photosynthesis, and that produces energy. So we need the light. You could say we need the light to, sometimes we can experience it physically, but more than anything, it's a source of inspiration. It gives us hope. And human beings flourish when they've got hope. When everything's hopeless, there's just basically depression. It's just everything's pushed down. So if we've got no hope in our life, so the light really gives us that hope. And it's not a kind of, and it's a real thing that we can move to, because we know it deep within ourselves. We have that light, and we try to use our mindfulness to remember that we have it, that the light is always there, even when we forget it. So we come back to it, like doing the meditation. We're going to be aware of the breath, and our mind wanders off, and then we think, oh no, I'm supposed to be watching the breath. Oh, that's what I decided to do. You come back to it. So the practice, you could say the practice of compassion is to remember you are a compassionate being. Think compassionately, speak compassionately, and act compassionately, and compassion will flourish like a lotus rising above the surface of the water. It's a lovely image, I think, personally. And well, we talked about diving deeper. So, in going down into the roots, we sometimes feel like, okay, maybe I can go a bit deeper now. I can sort of open up. It can be pretty frightening down there in the depths. So you need to recognize that can be very challenging for some people, opening up to the things that we may have been avoiding. Sometimes we may need to avoid certain things so that we can cope and to integrate them at the right time. But we have this idea, and it is natural to practicing meditation and mindfulness. You will naturally go deeper. You can't help it, actually, even if you're not trying. As long as if you become more aware, you'll start going deeper, and something will start growing up. And then the two will meet, and you're going to have to integrate it all. So that's a kind of nice process that goes on. Often, though, we need to figure out where we are. So, like, are we kind of really keeping some things at a distance? And we're not giving ourselves a hard time if we are. We just think that's necessary for the moment. I don't want to go there. It's just too overwhelming. And that may be the right way to deal with that. I'm not saying it is. It depends what it is and who you are and so on. But just really coming to terms with the fact that if you don't feel very much compassion a lot of the time, you just think, well, okay, I don't feel much compassion. I remember having a discussion with someone at Breathworks many years ago who said he was the most loving, kind person. And he said he never felt kind. So he wasn't a very good judge of himself, actually, because everyone else knew he was kind, but he never actually had a feeling of kindness. So sometimes you don't really feel things, you just are kind and loving and so on. So you need to be careful of being a judge of yourself, because sometimes we can misjudge ourselves, and maybe our friends, if we have friends who can, be honest with us, can give us sort of some help in recognizing, well, actually, yeah, well, I'm meeting with you because I like you, nice person. And sometimes we think, I'm not a nice person. And they say, well, do you think I'm stupid, mate? They're not a nice person. I'm only meeting with you because you're a nice person, so I like you. And you think, oh, yeah, so I must be quite, some people like me, that's good. So it begins to change your view of yourself. It's an oversimplification. Sometimes we're just lost up there in the forest. There's a picture now on the screen of a series of pools coming out of a rainforest, I should imagine. And there's the rock is formed into pools, and there's little waterfalls trickling down, and there's a dark area in the bushes, darkness, and sometimes that's where we think we are. We're a bit lost in life, we're not quite sure where we are. It all feels a bit dark, a bit cramped. And first thing to do is to think, okay, this is where I am, and how can I change that? So to find out where we are, we need to immerse ourselves in the pool of mindfulness. And this is what you've been doing the whole time when you've been practicing mindfulness. You've been immersing yourself in training without even training sometimes, just to become more aware of yourself, more aware of your needs, your habits, your behavior, your thoughts, your actions, and so on. And I don't like to tell people this really, but basically, once you've opened the door of mindfulness, you can't close it. You're kind of like stuck. You're going to have to go forward, because you can't suddenly not be mindful. You can't suddenly be unmindful. You can temporarily. I mean, you could take drink or drugs or something, or distract yourself so much that, and we do that probably, some of those things, quite a lot of the time. But we can't completely shut the door. It's opened, and we even become aware that we're trying to close the door. And it's a kind of like, you know, you're still mindful. You're thinking, I really don't like being mindful. It was easier when I wasn't mindful. You know, things just happened. And I didn't have to deal with them. But now I can see that I'm having to deal with these things. And so it's a bit like you open up this door, remove this barrier to mindfulness, and it really is like this. One of these pools at the top, I kind of like to imagine it is full of, it's in the tropics, and it's water in it. It's kind of clean, clear water, and it's like a warm bath. And I've been in streams like this in New Zealand, and sometimes they come out of hot springs, and you can immerse yourself in this lovely, warm, clean water, and you just sort of, you know, it's just got your head above the water. You're just soaking up the heat and the nutrients of the salts in the water and things. You just feel so good being there. And I think if you have this idea of mindfulness as being like a pool of warm water that you're immersed in, and it's just like opening the pores of your skin, and it's opening your mind, you know, the pores of your skin is a symbol for opening your mind, and just like letting in the goodness of the water and the nutrients and the heat and so forth. So in this retreat, this is an immersion retreat. So we could use this image. If our minds are just wandering, we're getting a bit bored, we could just perhaps even imagine. And when I say imagine, you don't have to have an image. You could have a feeling that you're in a warm bath of mindfulness. And the mindfulness is actually connecting you to your loving kindness. And that's the two things really go together. It's a very, people beginning to realize this more and more, that mindfulness and compassion are one and the same thing. It's just different approaches to it. But you could say, if you want a logical way of looking at it, the mindfulness is the ability to stay mindful of the fact that you are a loving, compassionate person, and you know what's going on around you and how you're behaving, and you could become more and more a loving, kind person, and that will move you to the light. But there's a picture now of like it's like a wedding veil of something. There's a sort of veil, a covering that blocks us from our loving kindness, from our awareness, from waking up. And from Buddhism, there are 5 blockages or hindrances, the things that hinder us becoming more alive, more free. You could call them coverings of the mind, but gradually we become aware of these. So I'll just quickly tell you what they are, and Vidyamala will be going into them in detail tomorrow. First of all, there's the continual sensual desire. We're sensual beings. We love experiences through the senses. I mean, the most powerful sensual desire in life probably is sex. And then you're not doing that all the time. There's lots of other lovely sensual desires, chocolate cake, doing things that give your senses a sort of a nice sort of injection of pleasure. There's nothing wrong with sensual desire. It's a really good thing. We wouldn't continue to live really if we didn't have it. But when there's too much of it, when that's all we want out of life is pleasure, we want the senses to be satisfied, satiated with something, it gets in the way of our mindfulness. And unfortunately, once we become mindful, it becomes more and more difficult because we realize this pleasure isn't that much of a pleasure, that when I do this, something else comes with it, and I didn't really want that. And you kind of become aware that, sense pleasure. Maybe I shouldn't talk too much about it because Vidyamala will cover this tomorrow. Ill will, if you find yourself in a state of ill will, you first of all accept it. That's one of the blockages. You work with it. There's restlessness and worry. You can't sit still. You're kind of too worried about something. This is another blockage to the growth. There's something called sloth and torpor. A sloth is this animal that kind of goes up, climbs very, very slowly up a tree. If you ever watched it, it's just, it describes what sloth is really well. So in English, we have this word as a verb and it is a noun, a sloth or sloth, and torpor. I can't remember what torpor is. It's kind of like, anyway, Vidyamala explained it all tomorrow, but you probably know what I mean. You know what sloth and torpor is. You can't be bothered doing anything. And then another one is doubt and indecision. This is sometimes the worst one because you think you know what you should do, but you think, oh, I don't know if I should do it, or I don't know what happened if I do it. I don't know, and you can't make up your mind. And so any of these things, when there's too much of them, they just block you from growing, really. Then you get the freedom from blocking, and you get these 7 factors of awakening that come from Buddhism. And the first starts with mindfulness. So you've already awoken the faculty of mindfulness. And if you've done any mindfulness training, which I assume you all have because you're here, you've been working on opening up this faculty. So you know that you've got the faculty of being mindful. And sometimes in some distant past that you didn't use it and you weren't very mindful. But now you are mindful, so that faculty is woken up. It can be woken up more. So the awakening factors start with mindfulness. They lead on to investigation of mental states, which is kind of what we're doing right at this moment, investigating, and we will be doing in the practices, investigating our mental states. This will release energy. You become more energetic and able to do all these things more freely and easily. The energy is freed up more and more, get more and more energy, and it becomes so energetic, it's almost like intoxicating. So then it all has to calm down and become, calm. And then you feel more and more absorbed in a deeper, more contented, more focused, more happy sort of state where you don't need anything. You're just absorbed in that state of mind. And this leads to kind of a blue sky mind of equanimity. You don't need to go anywhere. You just are. I said this morning in the meditation, we are just breath. We don't have to think I'm breathing in and bringing out. We're just breath. And it's where like the mind's not interested in being anything other than breath. We are just the breath. So there's a certain duality of me focusing on the breathing, sort of dissolving away and just melting together into one. And it's a bit like we could just sit still. We don't have to do anything. Maybe then a need arises and we just go and do it. We come back, we can sit still. We don't have to be looking at our telephones. We don't have to be distracting ourselves in all the ways we do. We just can sit still. What a lovely place to be. Anyway, I'll talk a bit more about these on Wednesday. The picture, Rosie, is one of the pebbles. They look like they're floating on water. I don't know how they've done this photo, but they are sort of circular white pebbles. It's a rather beautiful picture. And they kind of get smaller as the perspective goes off into the distance towards the sun. And you could see them as stepping stones. So the five awakening factors are like stepping stones. You'll go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and go to the sun. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but we can look at that more. In fact, the good thing about the awakening factors is once you develop mindfulness, the others start to awaken naturally. And the more energy you put into allowing them and encouraging them and nurturing them to develop, the quicker they develop. And more things have arise often that you have to integrate, and that will allow the next awakening factor to come about. So once you start, you probably all know this, once you start meditating, you start realizing you've got mental events going on in your mind all the time. And then what you'll start doing is working out whether these ones are helpful and these ones are not so helpful. And so you'll have this investigation going on and you'll go through the factors. These, for those who might like to know where they come from, these awakening factors, you can find them in several texts, but you can find them particularly in the Satipatthana Sutta, which is one of the foundations of mindfulness that most of what we do is based on, the four, sometimes called foundations of mindfulness, Satipatthana Sutta. So it's a seminal text for mindfulness. And lastly, there's another bell curve, like at the beginning, that says that at the beginning of the retreat, or when we start this process, rather, of the awakening factor, when we start this process, we start to become aware, integration happens, we start going up, energetic release happens, we come up to a kind of level of energy and a massive energy and openness and awakeness, and then it calms down and it flows downwards into a state of equanimity, of clarity, of balance. So, lovely path to go on. Of course, you have to climb over a few hurdles on the way, but you'll have the resources for doing so. So that's it for today. Now it's a black screen, so I'll stop sharing. So I hope there wasn't too much information. I hope there were lots more of images and things to. I think images work better. Even the words. I mean images in terms of words that evoke things, not necessarily seeing something. But this whole process of going deeper and discovering something that's bright, nourishing, that helps you to flourish, that you grow, is the basis of this retreat. So that's it.
Thank you.
And that's I hope you remember all these things particularly on the days when you're struggling a little bit. Just think, actually, there's a little bit of light down there somewhere. I just need to open up to it.
So do you want to open up for a few questions, Sona? If anyone's got any questions that they want to ask, to clarifying or reflections.
So if you use the hand reaction, or Rosie, you could just ask if you want the question.
So what Sona means by the hand reaction is to go to reactions at the bottom of the screen, and you've got your raise hand option there, your electronic hand. And because we're across two screens, that means we can see. But if anyone would find it easy just to unmute yourself and speak, then please do that as well. Yeah, any questions or reflections?
Must have been very clear.
You're not waiting long enough. You need to wait a bit longer for people to pluck up the courage to speak. If they want to, that is.
Just to say, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? It's quite. I mean, how difficult is it? Because I always feel that I haven't really achieved very much when I'm meditating, and yes, and getting this awareness. I mean, it's something that we shouldn't strive for too much. Presumably, we have to sort of just accept the state that one's in, and it'll change.
That is a really wonderful question to ask, Vivian. And it's a lot of people have this difficulty that, you know, when you're meditating, it seems like not much is happening.
Mm.
Particularly if you do compassion practices. Sometimes if you're doing something like a breathing anchor, you notice you can get more focused and things. So you think, oh, that was good. But doing compassion practices, you might just not feel anything, or you think nothing's happening. My mind's just here and there. I was thinking about this person or that person. And what is difficult to ask of ourselves is to not take too much notice of what happened in the meditation. The main thing about mindfulness was a bit of an eye-opener for me when I learned to the work of John Kabat-Zinn, particularly of mindfulness, mindfulness approaches. Is what's important is the fact you're mindful, that you know what's happening. Kind of win-win situation. Like, I feel really irritable and angry. Oh, I'm mindful of that. Good. I'm going to carry on feeling irritable and angry, and I'm at least mindful of it. And that will gradually change it. But the main thing to do is ask yourself outside of meditation over the course of time. It won't happen like tomorrow or today. It may do, but it may happen a little bit. You meditate well, and then you'll notice how what sort of way you're responding to things in your life. I remember it took me, when I first learned to meditate, I think because I meditated for many years, first 12 years, I don't think much happened in my meditation at all. But I realized I was growing into a different person. Yeah. And I took that as a reason to continue. So I had full confidence that the meditation was affecting me, but I wasn't judging it from what was happening in the meditation. And I think it's a big mistake that people have. They think, I want to be a good meditator, so something's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to get into this state of mind. And then sometimes outside of meditation, you see the same person acting really awfully to other people. And you think, well, what's the good of that? You know, it's a bit like, the reason you're meditating isn't for sensual pleasure, because that's just a blockage. It's actually a growth of you as a human being, of becoming more and more of what you really are. So you should be looking at, has it affected my life in any way? Has my life improved in any way? Sometimes it feels it's got worse sometimes, because when you were unmindful, you thought you had a good life. But then when you wake up to what your life is, you begin to realize, actually, it wasn't as good as I thought it was. And you kind of wished you weren't mindful, because you could have carried on in that sort of fantasy of, that previous world. But that's really the way to judge your meditation. It's, don't worry about what's happening. As long as you can remember, perhaps at the end of the meditation, to ask yourself, what happened? Just don't think that was good or bad, but that's interesting. I fell asleep the whole time. Well, that's interesting. I must be tired. Told me something.
Well, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and I always think to look back, maybe ask yourself, what's changed over the last 6 months as a consequence of my practice? How am I? Am I a little bit kinder, maybe a little bit more aware? So retrospective kind of reflection can be helpful, looking back over a decent period of time. Say you've been meditating for, 6 months or a year. Don't think, as Sona was saying, don't assess it by the change over a day, but assess it over the change over a month, 2 months, 6 months. And in terms of your point about, presumably we shouldn't be forcing, I think the image of the lotus is really, really good in that respect, because of course you can't force a plant to grow, can you? The lotus has its own patient movement out of the mud towards the light. So to allow that kind of quality ourselves.
Julia.
So can you say a few maybe words of advice of how to work with those reflections when you think what didn't happen in the practice, or what didn't happen in this kind of growth, as Vijayamala just said, and over the 6 months, because it's such a habit of the mind of checking in on kind of the faults or kind of the shortcomings, and kind of noticing I wasn't kind there and I wasn't kind here. How do we work with that?
Well, I think when you're actually meditating, it's probably not the best place to. It's enough just to be aware of what's happening really in the meditation. And if you start thinking about what do I do now, how to go deeper in the meditation and things like that, you're kind of distracting yourself in the meditation. Usually, what a lot of people don't realize about meditating, particularly, is the need for preparation. You know, it's what happens outside of the meditation that's going to change the way you meditate. So, you know, it's a self-feeding system. So if you act kindly, you're honest and you're caring, you'll probably find it easier to meditate. If you're always irritable and selfish and you just, you know, you're tight, when you sit down, you're still going to be tight. And you can't not be tight because the rest of your life is tightness. So it's a bit like the rest of your life is the preparation for meditation. So the more mindfulness you can bring to mental states, speech, and actions in your ordinary life, the easier you'll find it to meditate. It's not to say you have to become a perfect person to meditate, but you know, even when we're angry with someone, even like murderously angry, you know, when we get really riled by someone, if we're aware that that's happening, we've got into that state and it's not really a helpful state, you've kind of already changed the state because you're aware of it and you're less likely to lash out and say something that's just going to start a war. You know, you're just going to remain a bit more calmer and so on. And you'll gradually find it would be a natural process that you can drop deeper into the meditation. So I won't worry too much about how to, I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically or if this is helpful, but it is really, meditation is predicated by your life, you know, the way you behave in life. So the more kind, the more caring, more awake, more alive you are, the easier it will be to meditate. And if you notice in the meditation you're getting stuck over certain things, you could look at that in terms of, well, what is outside of the meditation that's feeding that state? And if you can make adjustments, some things you can't adjust, some things you just have to learn to accept and deal with in that way. But some things you can change. You can change them. Well, you can at least try to change them. Habits are very difficult things to change, but once you become aware of a habit, it's already starting to change slightly.
Yeah.
And I would see meditation, so I think it's better to see it as like creating art, really. You can't force it. You know, you can learn the techniques, you can practice, and you just keep practicing, and then something amazing appears eventually. But don't worry too much if it doesn't appear straight away. And even straight away might mean for the first 10 years. So
I've got
it requires a lot of faith and confidence,
yeah,
and just accepting that life is more interesting with these little challenges.
That's great. Thank you, Sona. Thank you.
Laura,
you were also asking a question, Julia, or making a comment about, you know, maybe you look back over 6 months and as Sona was saying, maybe, you know, you think I feel worse than when I started. But I think, you know, that's unusual. I think that's unusual. But awareness, you know, we do become aware of everything. But to specifically reflect, well, how have I changed for the better? So to drop that in as a question, how have I changed for the better? And we will have all changed for the better in one way or another with meditation practice.
Yeah. Just remember, we've got a negativity bias, so we have to work quite hard.
Exactly.
Laura, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask or say?
Yes, I was just wondering if you could go over the image of roots being planted in the mind again. Because I understand kind of going towards the sun a lot better, but I'm just wondering what's like the equivalent of the lotus flower image, what's being planted in our minds when we practice mindfulness.
I think what's being planted in your mind is the fact that you have a faculty for love. Well, you probably know that, but you probably may not take it seriously enough. So it's kind of like, it's like taking a camera and you've got wide angle lens and you see something like there's something beautiful in it, and then you focus in on it and you try to pay more attention to it. So, you know, doing mindfulness, compassion meditations is helpful because it starts training the mind in that way. But you can do it, you know, if you're, particularly when you're around other people, is usually the easiest thing. You can do little things that might be challenging, just like if you can wash up or something, you could help someone or make a phone call and cheer someone up. That would be a way of paying attention to that sort of sun that's there. That's there. And maybe even at first you have to have a certain amount of kind of faith that you have it, and you have to kind of have faith in yourself and think, well, I do have this, and even if I'm not sure if I have it, let's proceed on the basis that maybe I have got it, and I can love, and I may not feel it ever, but I may it may be something that completely changes me. And but don't go looking for something like love, because you'll never find it. But it's just like having this image, if you like, that there is within us a brightness. I could call it positivity. You know, something that's good that is flowing out of it. Like a plant, what's good for a plant is what makes it live. What's bad for a plant is what makes it die. So it's kind of like what's making us more alive. And it does require a certain amount of faith, but hopefully if you kind of think about it, reflect on it a bit, it begins to wake up and you think, actually, well, I'm a human being. Human beings love other human beings quite a lot of the time. They're helpful. Society wouldn't function if we didn't love people. I mean, but there are bad things that happen as well, so it's not pretending it's all good, but most of the time we think everything's bad because we've got this negativity bias, and we're always looking out for dangers. So it's quite hard work looking at things for good. When at Breathworks, we teach people to go and look at things, and you have to look at things. So things at 25 seconds at Vidyamala.
Yeah, at least 5 seconds.
Minimum of 5 seconds for it to stick in your mind if it's good, if it's beautiful. What we tend to look at and get interested in is what's rotten. God, who's brought that rubbish over there? And then we focus on that, and that we see things, you know, in nanoseconds that are bad, but to allow that goodness, the beauty, to become more available in the mind, you need to focus on it for more than 5 seconds. So, you know, the more you do of that, the longer you'll do it, the more enjoyment you get from life, and it becomes a kind of feeding, a positive feedback loop where you're kind of one thing's feeding another, and it's growing and growing and growing. Does that help at all?
Yeah, thank you.
So I think we should have a break now for break purposes.
We'll come back in 25 minutes. So come back on the hour, whatever your time zone is. So in 25 minutes. But the idea will be, this isn't a kind of break from your retreat experience or your mindfulness practice. So, you know, getting a drink, whatever you need, going to the loo and so on. But if you can stay in the zone, as it were, if you've got a garden, maybe you could go out into your garden. If you haven't, you could just look out the window. So to see if we can stay in this kind of arrival, nurturing, mindful kindness space, watching the mind, watching the heart, being interested and curious. And then we'll come back for a practice with Sona. Good. Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now. So welcome back, everyone. Okay, so in this session, I'm going to have a meditation, and I'm going to lead a meditation breathworks connection practice on meditating, coming into contact with ourselves a bit more, meaning maybe allowing that sense of kindness, of loving kindness to flow through us, recognizing that we're good, fundamentally a good human being, and we have the capacity for becoming more and more than we are. So we'll focus on ourselves a little bit. It's not always easy to feel good about yourself. Sometimes it almost feels like you shouldn't be feeling good about yourself, but it's let's in this practice celebrate ourselves. So we are alive, we're dealing with things, we're fundamentally good. And then we'll go just think of a friend, and gradually we'll expand it out to include whole retreat and maybe just reflect a little bit on the whole world. So that'll be practice. And just again to say that if things come up, some things we become aware of, and it's almost like, oh yes, I realize that now. And you might find that you need to just reflect on whatever's come up and sort of integrate it with you. Sometimes, really difficult things come up when we're meditating, and it's not easy to give advice how to deal with those things, but recognizing that there is probably resistance to engage with it, and sometimes engaging too much with difficulties is counterproductive. It may be better to focus on the fact that actually we're strong, we're resourced, we're confident, and this thing that's bothering us, that's coming up, maybe it's not the right time to deal with this, but I can deal with this. I can build, as they say, a bridge. I can get over it. I can move on into my life. Some things we have to take with us and kind of look after. But sometimes it's things come into our mind rather like unwanted guests, and we kind of wish they would go away. But sometimes it's necessary just to accept those guests and maybe accept that they might be bringing something to nourish us with. So I thought we'd start with a poem by Rumi, a famous poem that probably everyone in the mindfulness world has heard, The Guest House, because I think this kind of demonstrates this whole process very well. So if you like to settle into your meditative position, there's a word in Buddhism called a mudra, which is a symbol of, like, you could hold your hand in a certain way, like a teaching mudra, or you could have a open your hand like a giving mudra. So you can think of your whole body as being placed in a meditation mudra. So you place your body in this mudra of the shape of meditation, which should be as comfortable as possible. Not everyone can be comfortable sitting still, but you can sustain it for 20 minutes and you feel alive and energy is flowing. And even if you're tired, you think, oh, I don't know if I can cope with this, just accepting that's how you're feeling at the moment. And you may need to even just to lie back or lie down and just let go. Maybe that's what you need. But also you may feel, okay, let's just see how it would be if I become alert and just accept this impact. Okay, so The Guest House by Rumi, and then followed by a compassion practice of connection. The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of all its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be cleaning you out for a new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from the beyond. Wherever the beyond is, mystery of life, just allow these things to arise. So focusing, first of all, on the sensations. We're essential beings. We're full of sensations. And allowing the negative, the more unpleasant ones to just register, to be there. The neutral ones, like breathing, is a good one to focus on, because that may not be particularly pleasurable. It may not be particularly unpleasant. It can be a bit boring, but there is sensation there. It's neutral. You can just become aware of the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. This actually has a very physiological, very positive physiological effect on us, becoming aware of our breathing. There's a natural tendency to calm us, to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Breathing in, breathing out, allowing ourselves to become more calm, more collected. And then just, you can be aware of any sounds in the surroundings, any disturbances outside you. Actually, the disturbances are always inside you. The disturbances I call outside are more like noises that disturb us. And then we have disturbances inside us, the thoughts, emotions. You could even imagine yourselves as being the guest master. Welcomes the guest, whatever they are, and registers them. So becoming aware of what's going on. It's another way of putting it, what's happening right now in our mind. Without shoulds or coulds, just what is. And then becoming aware that deep within us, a kind of joy, spark of brightness, light, if you like, ray of sunshine. Just allowing ourselves to become aware that we have the potential to be so much more. Brighter, lighter being. Kind of focusing on this and maybe even saying to ourselves, may I become more, may I become brighter, may I become more loving. Can be a way of feeding this process, helping it to grow. Almost like stepping away from or uncovering that part of us that is brighter, stronger, more confident, more easily satisfied. Allowing it to grow like a lotus growing up from the mud, through the dark water to the clean, sunlit water, maybe even into the air above the rays of the sun. Now, if this doesn't quite work for you, you could also perhaps try just breathing a loving, kindly breath, particularly to if you've got pain in the body, tightness, breathing a loving breath as though you're radiating something to, or breathing into that part of the body to soften, nurture, doing tender, loving care. If we get lost within thoughts and distractions, just noting it, that's what's happened. And we can refocus by coming back into the body, so to speak, becoming aware of your breathing, sensations in the body. Breathing a kindly breath, or radiating a loving kindness that flows through the body, through the mind, transforming, bringing together into a wholeness, goodness. All that we find. May I be well as can be. May I be happy as can be. May I be loving and kind to myself and others. It's focusing on ourselves, caring for others as a way of being kind to ourselves. And then we can bring to mind a near and dear friend. Be aware of them breathing. Somewhere, wherever they are, they're breathing. We know that because they're alive. We can breathe together with them. Recognizing that just like ourselves, we have suffering, discomfort, pain. They too experience states of pain, difficulties, disappointments, grief. But like ourselves, we can also experience moments of pleasure. When things go well, when we do something we're pleased with, proud of. It may just be a small thing, like making someone a cup of tea. They too have their moments of pleasure. Little pleasures, sometimes big pleasures. They too have a sun, love within them. And if you find it helpful, you can imagine creating a vibration. Your thoughts are creating a kind of vibration, a wave that is flowing through the space that divides us to our friend and affecting them. There are many vibrations and waves in life. In the material world, everything is vibrating. All the particles are constantly vibrating at frequencies. And our love frequency can be transmitted. Or we can imagine it being transmitted, if we want to take it literally, to our friend. As though we're in synchronicity with them, harmony with them. Wishing them joy, wellness, strength, courage, kindliness, tenderness. We can do this as we breathe with them. And then we can just remember we're meditating together. I was thinking of loving kindness as like a drumbeat, a pulse, boom, vibration, being sent to all of you, including me, sending out a pulse beat of kindness, well-wishing. May you be kind, may you have wellness, may you be free as much as possible from suffering. May I love you all. And in your own way, you could find a way of connecting, pulsing, if you like, radiating. Even if you can't have a feeling of kindness, maybe just the idea of kindness, brightness to us, to the rest of us on this retreat. Then gradually we could expand that out to the people around us, wherever we are. We could be like ambassadors for loving kindness, or messengers, beating out the rhythm, kindly, caring love. Waking up those with sorrows and difficulties, so that the beat is healing, revitalizing, and it's not easy to think of people at a distance because we don't know who they are, but we know there are hundreds of thousands of people all around, even billions of people in the whole world. And if you like, you could just have a sense of a whole mass of people breathing. If you need something more specifically, the thought that came to my mind was just imagine a football stadium full of people meditating quietly, pulsing calmness into the world. We're part of that. You could say we're part of the whole world breathing, the rhythm of the breath, the in-breath, the out-breath, the kindly breath, radiating, lifting up, brightening other beings. So I'm just going to reposition myself and just sit quietly still and move around, move the body. Just be a moment, returning to my desk. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for bit sharing, an inquiry. Someone wants to say how that was, how it worked for them, anything came up, anything you want to share. Just put your hand, one of your digital hands up.
Or just unmute too.
Okay, yeah. Ina.
Yeah, I found it really helpful to sense into how kindness feels in the body. And so that was something I'd not experimented much with before, and it was really lovely. And I had the image that Vidyamala was using at the beginning, the gesture, you know, the opening hand, and I had a sense of the softness and the warmth. And was able to feel it for myself, but also to have that sense of it being there for others as well. So thank you.
So, Ina, it's quite fascinating what you said, and I was just wondering if there was any particular, you know, you said you could looking for feeling this in the body. Did anything sort of any particular area in the body kind of arise? You could say, oh yes, I felt something here or there.
I think it was more a sense of really grounded presence. It felt like a whole body response. So and also a lot in the back of the body. So again, that helps me to feel grounded and centered if I'm more in the back than at the front. And no, I think it really was. It did feel quite global. It didn't feel specific. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Katerina.
So I would like to share also my experience. And for me, the image with the waterfalls and the kind of jungly trees with a little bit of the dark in it came to mind during Let the Light In. So I felt like there was this kind of trees in me also with the water, And it came to me, there's light on the one side, but there's also like a little bit of the mud somewhere. And somehow this image arose with this lotus flower being rooted in this a little bit dark place, but coming up and having the light through the trees, and which gave kind of bloom to some very colorful flowers. So this was very new to me. So thank you for having those pictures in the presentation.
And Catherine, what, this dark, muddy, probably gooey stuff where the roots are in. Did you have any, can you say anything about that?
Yes, I can. I have been reflecting a little bit on that in the past weeks as well. So I identified like 4 kind of animals, and I have assorted them to some, I don't know the English word, the Glaubenssätze. It's like things you think, like habitual patterns of thinking, like very sticky thoughts. You think like you're not good enough. I don't know, what is the English word for this?
It's not good enough, that would be.
No, it's like Glaubenssätze.
Repetitive thought patterns.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And so I assorted them, and they kind of came out, and I let them come out, and being shed on by the light and the sunlight, they changed to more positive animal figures. So I was very content and happy about it.
And did you do anything with that contentment and happiness? You just sat with it, or did you?
I tried to radiate it and use it also for those flowers, like the ones I assorted them to, like, what are the English words, like caring and compassion and equanimity and calmness. I have like those colors kind of in me assorted to it, and they were blooming. It was more like a colorful, nice world. And then it's the part of the radiation came. So I tried to let it shine out.
And did that work well with a friend and then with other?
Yes.
Yeah. Any difficulties?
Difficulties keeping up the awareness and the not slipping off, but yes, otherwise it went very well.
Okay. All right. So someone else put their hand up and then take it down suddenly. No. Ah, yes, Monica.
Yes, that was me. I wanted to really thank you for what you said about loving kindness being like a drumbeat pulsing, because within a second it changed my experience, and from something that I generate myself to something that I'm already in, like something that I am bathing in and just can flow through me no matter the direction. So this moment, it becomes effortless, and it's just such a great shift in perspective. Then it also doesn't become something that I am doing, it just is. So I never had this comparison before, so I'm really glad I heard it today. Thank you.
What were the feelings that came with that?
It's very difficult to put into words, but I felt such a peacefulness in my body.
Okay.
In the way that it is calm, my breathing was slower. I felt quite grounded and steady and open, feeling more space around me. Yeah.
And did that happen throughout the practice when you moved away from yourself to other people?
It started before, so it's not something that happened like in one moment, but I felt more warmth.
Good.
Thank you.
So we've had quite a few people telling us about lovely experiences they had. Anyone have any not so lovely experiences or fell asleep or anything like that? You can. Okay, we've got Sarah. No, Sarah.
Sarah. Yeah, I guess I went into the mud properly. It was nice in respect of I gave myself permission to go there, and the kindness came through that by shining my kind of torchlight of awareness around my body to see what was there, and it wasn't particularly pleasant. There was this enormous fatigue, tightness in the chest, tightness in the throat, tension in the shoulders, this kind of feeling of exhaustion. So I just went with that. I gave myself permission just to go with that. I was in and out of consciousness. I let go, came back, went off again, came back. Curious about what was happening in the body, but every time there was thoughts and feelings attached to what I was discovering, perhaps a bit of sadness, a bit of not disappointment, but an understanding that what I was experiencing wasn't particularly ideal or the perfect state to be in, and it needed some love and care and some rest. So yeah, I think going beyond radiating love, don't get me wrong, the connection meditation is one of my favorite meditations ever. I couldn't go beyond to myself at this point in time. I had to literally stay with what was going on with myself in the mud.
And compared to how you started, and how did you feel at the end? Can you remember, or how do you feel now?
Yeah. How do I feel now? Like I've just opened a can of worms. I think there's going to be some releasing coming here for sure. I'm feeling very tired, very exhausted, but I'm very aware of it now, where I think as previously, perhaps for quite a while, I've been pushing and blocking that. So to actually come really close to that with all the body sensations that are present with it right now, it's given me an opportunity to make some better choices, and that's probably why I'm here actually today, to have a rest.
Maybe I'd just like to point out, I think you're also demonstrating loving kindness by sharing your experiences with us. You're giving us something.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is Julia, Sona. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Hi. Thank you very much for the meditation, and it's the first time I've done this particular one. A difficulty arose for me right at the beginning when I found I was very triggered by the first of the loving kindness phrases in the use of the word more, and the form of triggering was just, I suppose, my inner critic immediately arose. And even though it's true to say I'm here because I would love to learn to become, for example, more loving, the fact that the phrase itself, the critic was, oh, you're not loving enough, you're never going to learn, you failed. I had that circle of thought going around. And I suppose it was extremely helpful for me to be able to then stand back and realize how active not just my inner critic, but my outer critic is, because it arose, and feelings of lack of trust arose at that point, which helps me realize I bring a high level of expectation to the security in which we're going to be held, particularly in a new group. And I was able at that point, I suppose, just to bring some self-compassion to that experience and to, I suppose, calm to come back down. And then it became incredibly helpful, your connection, us connecting through breath. So the first time you introduced that, connecting to the person you were thinking about through sharing the breath with them, wherever they might be in the world. And that was hugely, just very warm, and well, it was an image which worked incredibly well for me to feel much more connection with other people. It was really powerful. So yeah, a mixture, and thank you very much.
And do you have any, what about if we did it again and the same phrases was used? How would that affect you?
I think it would be fine, because I could see that my reaction was just an individual reaction based on my history, and that someone else in the group could listen to that without any triggering at all. Yeah. And it would just be an expression of their intention, the reason why they were here today, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think second time round it would be different.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you worked with it, but really, really amazingly well. And
no, I learned
would you, you know, don't know quite how to put this now, but do you feel like you've become more?
I've gone deeper.
Well, then you must have become more.
Okay. Fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Meg, you got your hand up.
Thank you. I had a very disturbed meditation, unfortunately. I just couldn't settle to begin with. And just a little bit of, a teeny little bit of history is that I live in flats, and I'm on the 3rd floor, and the lift has not been working for the last week. So I haven't been out of the flat for the last week because I can't get down the stairs. And my frame of mind when I came on the retreat was kind of one of tension and unrest, and not very kind to myself, because I was beating myself up because I'd let people down. So this morning, with you talking, it was really good to think, yeah, I have it in me to be kind to myself and to be loving to myself, because I'm very loving and kind to other people. So I was all right before. I wasn't so bad before the meditation. But one ear was on you, well, not on you, but you know what I mean, listening to you. And the other ear was on waiting for a phone call about the lift, because I've had no contact with people about the lift. And somebody rang me, and I could feel the anger kind of building up. I mean, I'm kind of shaking now. And he was so nice, bless him. Anyway, to cut long story short, I'm probably making a muddle of this. He spoke and he said that it should be fixed this afternoon. And it was their fault. They boxed it up. And that, you know, he was very sorry. And part of me was thinking, well, that's really good of him. He's apologising and accepted, you know, what he's done. But I could feel the other side of me saying it shouldn't have happened in the first place. So when I came back to your meditation, you were on the part of kind of loving the wider community, you know, the world as it was. And it really made me think how I have to work with my loving kindness for myself, because again, I was beating myself up that perhaps I should have said something on the phone. I'm sorry to take up time. So I just really thank you for what you said this morning, Sona. And I'll listen to the meditation again, and perhaps I'll get more out of it. But I feel very kind of now, and I just thought I'd share it with you.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of questions I could ask you about those things. But I think one of the things, just to kind of point out that you seem to have felt very kindly towards the nice voice on the phone that was telling you things were going to be fixed. And isn't that loving kindness?
Yes, I guess it is. Yeah.
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 And then you noticed how quick the negativity bias came in. But it was their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've been in touch with the chief executive, and he kind of promised that he'd send somebody, or he'd get somebody get in touch with me, and that was Thursday, and I've heard nothing until now.
Yeah. It's probably a bit far-fetched to think that doing the Metabhavana helped your lift get fixed. Sorry, doing this loving kindness practice helped your lift get fixed, but
yes.
You never know.
Yeah, it may well have done. Yeah, but I'm so glad I've come on the retreat. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thanks, Meg. Yeah.
No, can I just add something there? That, I mean, anyone doing a meditation, having to go off the meditation, have a sort of quite emotionally charged phone call, and then come back to the meditation, that in itself is a victory. You know, that you did that. And of course you're going to have these mixed emotions of, you know, gratitude and anger and so on. So then the practice becomes, well, how can I be kind of kindly around this storm that's going on inside me, which I think you've exemplified. That you came back and then you've shared it with the group. So I hope that you can, recognize that what you did was, quite quietly amazing. The fact that you even did come back to the meditation, a lot of people wouldn't. They'd have thought, well, our meditation's been interrupted, so I just give up. But the fact that, you came back and you sort of regrouped and you stayed with what was going on and you've shared it with the group.
Thank you.
The lotuses are growing.
And really wonderful news, you're getting your lift fixed today as well, Meg. That's really fascinating.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vidyamala. Thanks, Sona.
So what do you think, Vidyamala?
Pardon?
What do you think we should do now? Wind it up, or?
Well, let's just see if there's anyone else, and then if otherwise we'll just stop. One thing to say as well is that we're aware that speaking on Zoom can be quite a big deal for some people. I would have found it a big deal many years ago. So if you want to use the chat, to say something on the chat, please feel free to use that as well as another option. And also just to say that we are recording the inquiry because people who aren't here, I think they'd find it really interesting to hear, what's going on. But I should definitely have asked for your permission beforehand. So if you're not happy with this, we'll just cut this bit of the recording off. So if you're not happy, what you could do is message Mark or give Mark a ring and say, I don't want that recording to be used. It won't be used more widely than this group. It's just for the people on the retreat. And there's 3 or 4 people that aren't here. But I really apologize that we didn't ask for didn't give you those caveats beforehand. And it's absolutely fine for you to contact Mark and say, look, I don't want that to be recorded, and it's very, very easy for him to simply edit it off and not include it in the playback list. Yeah.
Can I just ask one question? Because someone said my audio was quite quiet when I was talking. Was that the case for most people? Do I need to speak louder, or is it okay?
No, it's fine.
Most people are nodding no.
No, I think it was fine, Sona. Yeah.
It was fine.
Okay, I'm just letting Rosie know that you're all nodding.
Yeah. And is my audio okay? Because I changed the settings this morning. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. So we've got Gillian. Maybe Gillian can be the last person.
Okay.
Hi, it's very short, and I'm afraid I have to confess I fell asleep. So with everyone else having these marvelous and different experiences, I think I probably need to go back and listen again and not not lie on the floor.
Mm.
But maybe I was tired anyway, and maybe I needed it. But yes, but thank you for that. And possibly I need to turn up the volume on the video, so that would probably help.
Yeah.
But thank you for the.
So just before you go, Gillian, how did you feel after? Sorry.
No, go on.
How did you feel after you woke up?
A mixture of, oh, I've missed this, and it's something I really, really wanted to do. Yeah, I've missed this, and I know it's really valuable it would be really valuable for me, and yeah, I need to go back and revisit it. Yeah.
So that you were sharing with me your thoughts about that, but did you know how you felt? Did it make you feel better having a sleep, or not worse? Sometimes you can feel worse after a sleep.
I kept on drifting in and out, and hearing your voice, and then going, then retreating again, so to speak. Yeah, I probably did need the sleep, and I probably do feel a little bit more wide awake now. But yeah.
Yeah. Good. So it had a very positive effect on you. So maybe you could reframe the effect of the practice. That was a great practice. We should say things are good or bad, but yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah. Good. All right. So time for a break again, and quite a long break. We're breaking for 3 hours.
4 hours. Is it 4? No, 3 hours. 3 hours, yeah. So coming back.
What are you going to do in that 3 hours? That's what you need to ask yourself. How do I stay on retreat in 3 hours, all on my own retreat? It's a solitary retreat. We're going from a joined up retreat to a solitary retreat. And yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I think, we're going to leave the Zoom room open, Mark?
Yep, we'll leave the Zoom room open, but I will be stopping the recordings.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to chat to each other, there'll be an option if there's anyone else there to chat with. But you've got three hours of practice, preparing food, eating food, going for a walk maybe, looking out the window if you can't get out the house, or walking up down your room, or moving around, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And yeah, see you later.
Yeah, and if people want to, come back to the computer when you got your lunch and see if there's anyone else there to have lunch with, you could see, because the room will be open. Yeah. Just
one little tip. When we come back, we'll be doing a body scan, a really nice, relaxing one that Julia's going to lead. If you want to stay awake for that, it might be good to have a little sleep beforehand. So you could set yourself up, beforehand, lie on the floor and go to sleep. And when you wake up, you can set an alarm or something, wake you up, and you'll be right as a bunny, to join in. So it's a little tip I found on retreats. Afternoon sessions, I normally fall asleep if I don't have a little sleep before the session. So many years of experience. See you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.